Well, welcome to our weekly podcast. I'm so excited to have our daughter, Jill Windham, with us again today. And I'm so excited, Jill, that you're back. I love what we talked about last week, about dealing with troubled times, because we all have them. My name is Allen Speegle. My wife and I, Janice, we started our life in ministry together in 1981 after I got saved in 1980. We are the founders of Safe Harbor International Network of Ministers, Journey School of Ministry, and GraceChannel.com. We pastored for well over 30 years. We haven't got it all figured out, but we have figured out some of it. And so we pray today as Jill and I share about facing difficult times, troubled times, some key factors and how to do that something will come alive in your heart and that you will begin to see that I'm going to make it. Yeah. I'm not staying where I'm at. And I think it's a big key, just deciding I'm not going to stay where I'm at. Now, last time, Jill, we talked about two important keys and, facing or things to remember during troubled times. And one was trouble comes to everybody.
Yep.
Nobody's immune to it. This is what I'm saying. Not even Jesus. Jesus was betrayed. Paul, we went through different people in the Bible, so we need to realize when we're going through stuff that it's going to come to pass. It's not going to stay this way. There's a better day coming. And then the last thing we talked about last week was how long trouble lasts is often determined by your focus. Now, if you listened to us last week, if you didn't, go back and listen to it. Go back and watch it. Whatever you focus on, you get more of. And we spent quite a bit of time talking about that. Yeah. And so if I'm going to come out, I'm going to face my difficulties. If I'm going to, make it through these moments that it seems like that I'm not going to make it, there's some things we need to remember. This is not one of the points, but I want to say this. You've heard me say this a lot, Jill, and whatever I'm going through, I have to remind myself of this sometimes. Whatever I'm going through, how many times have you been going through something you didn't think you were going to make it?
Yes,
but you did.
So many times. Yep, you've made it through every day of your life so far.
Yeah, so you're ahead. Mm-hmm. But I think about this. I'm going through something. It may seem like there's no hope. There may seem like that there's no possibility of coming out of this. But you know what's going to happen? A year, 2 years from now, whatever you're going through is going to be a 1 or 2 sentence story about what happened, what God did, and how he came out of it.
That's right.
Just like everything else that you've ever been through.
Yeah.
In the Jewish culture, that every male Jewish guy was given a rod. And it was somewhat of a diary. They used it with shepherding and things, but they would engrave significant events that happened in their life to remind them. When Moses stood before the Red Sea, the Egyptians behind, mountains on both sides, and he asked God, what am I going to do? What am I supposed to do? He said, what's in your hand? He said, a rod. And he said, stretch forth your rod, Moses. And really what he was saying was, stretch forth everything I've ever done for you.
Yeah.
Remind yourself.
Yeah. Psalm 23 says, your rod and your staff comfort me. So when David was going through hard times, the comfort of the testimony is what brought him through it.
Yeah, and I like to keep a file with things that I started trusting God for, and I'll date it. And then when it comes to pass, I'll date it. And then down the road, when I'm discouraged, going through the hard spot, I'll pull that out.
Yeah.
And I remind myself, God was with me back then, and he's going to be with me now.
That's right.
He said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. And you know what? When he said that, he actually meant it. Mm-hmm. He actually meant it. Okay, so let's jump into the third thing we need to remember. Is we need to remember to take responsibility for our mistakes. I can't take responsibility for anybody else's. but I can take responsibility for mine. You know, in grace, God's ability is not activated in our hearts until we get honest and we take responsibility.
That's right.
You know, it's so incredibly easy to want to blame the devil, blame the way we grew up,
blame everybody else,
blame our spouse, blame our children, blame our parents. But God forbid, we don't want it to be me.
Yeah.
Don't want it to be me. You know, Job 40, verse 8, and if you've never really studied the book of Job or heard a good teaching on the book of Job, I'd encourage you to do so. And I have one. You can contact us, and we'll be happy to send you the link to it, absolutely free. Job 40, verse 8 says, God asked Job a very direct question. He said, Job, are you going to continue to blame me? So are you going to continue to blame me for your trouble so you can appear faultless and right? One time Job asked God, I forget exactly how this came about, but Job was really questioning the integrity of God. And a lot of times people read the book of Job and they think Job is our role model for suffering or something. Right. You know, it's one of the most...
He was just a man working it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most Bible scholars believe that everything Job went through. Somebody said, well, I'm the second Job. Well, most scholars believe that everything Job went through happened in 9 months.
Yeah.
And so if you're the second Job, in the end, Job had twice as much as he did in the beginning.
Yeah.
He was the wealthiest man in that part of the world. Lost it all. Mm-hmm. And so he began to question the integrity of God. And I forget the chapter and verse it is, but God said something to this effect. Job, you think you're so smart?
Yeah.
Where were you when I spoke everything into existence?
Yeah.
You weren't there.
Yeah.
Where were you when the land was divided and waters covered the globe? Job, where were you?
Yeah.
You were nowhere to be found. So how is it, Job, that you think you're in a position to give me input and suggestions of how I should run things? Job, you need to go home. Basically, God was saying, Job, you need to go home and look in the mirror.
Well, one of the problems Job had, though, was that he was building a theology off of what people said instead of God himself. Like the book of Job, you find out that he was repentant at the end because he realized he was believing his whole theology was based off of what people said about God, not for what he experienced himself.
Yeah, and that's what it says. It said, Job said, up until now, I've lived off of crust and rumors about you, God.
Like, you should blame God for this, Job. He's abandoned you.
But now I know him for myself.
Yeah, that's good.
This is really don't have a lot to do with what we're talking about, but it's kind of humorous. Job's friends heard what happened to him. And Job's friends, Jill, if you remember, they came to check on their friend Job. They heard about everything. He had boils on his body. He had lost everything.
Lost his family.
He lost his family, lost everything. And let me say this. One of Job's problems was he was wanting God to do for his children what he was not willing to do.
Yeah, that's good.
Rather than instructing them in righteousness and modeling it for them, he prayed for them. Modeling righteousness is the way to get our children to walk in righteousness.
Right.
Prayer's not a substitute for that.
You can't pray them out of that. You got to show them.
No, you can't. You got to show them how to walk.
Right.
That's the reason, the Bible talks about in the Old Testament, Jill, it says, and when you're walking with your children, do this and do that.
Teach them as you go.
Yeah. And remember it says, after they crossed the Red Sea, they stacked up rocks.
Yes.
And so, some of the kids said, well, why are we stacking them rocks up? Mm-hmm. Because one day when you're walking with your son, he's going to ask you, what was these rocks for?
Yep.
And you're going to say, this is where our God, Jehovah, brought us over. The Red Sea, when it's all the Egyptians no more. And so Job, interesting thing, his friends come and they looked at it and they were taken back. Boils all over his body. He's sitting in sackcloth and ashes. And they said, Job, we've come to encourage you. And the Bible says they sat down in a circle around him. And I may have the days wrong on this, but it's something like for 3 or 4 days they sat there and looked at him and didn't say a word.
That's a lot of encouragement.
Yeah.
When you're that bad off, your friends don't have anything to say. Yeah.
They were taken back. And when they finally spoke up, remember, they said, we've come to encourage you. Mm-hmm. They said, tell us the truth, Job. Why did this happen?
Yeah.
Things like this do not happen to a righteous man. How is it, Job, that all of this has befallen you? And then it goes into what Jill said, that he repented. I'm not going to live off of what somebody else said about you and got passed on and passed on. But I want to know you for myself. Mm-hmm. I want to know you for myself. In Proverbs 28:13, it says, a person who refuses to admit their issues and faults can never be successful. You have to come to the place where you are secure enough to admit, I have found my problem.
And you said something, all of our life, I've heard you say this in some capacity as our dad and our pastor. He would say, you might be where you are, you might have been put where you are because of the decision of somebody else, but you stay where you are because of your decision.
That's right.
So God's always given you the ability, I tell our church this, to be the victor instead of the victim, no matter what's happened to you. You might be where you are because you had a super abusive, toxic relationship with your parents when you were a child, and no child deserves that. How old are you now? Are you able now to say, you know what, it's time for me to correct my heart, forgive them as much as I can forgive them, let God do. I'm not saying enter into a close relationship with people that are still hurting you, but I'm saying at some point I have to release them and take responsibility for my own emotions and my own future, because that's the power that God gave you with His grace.
That's right.
So,
and in doing that, we're talking about forgiving and letting go and putting it behind you. And we were talking earlier today, Jill, you and I were talking that forgiving someone, it's not because they deserve it.
Right.
And technically, they don't.
Right.
But you deserve the benefits.
That's right. It's for you. Forgiveness is not for them. It's for you.
Yeah. Trust me.
Yeah.
They're sleeping at night. Mm-hmm. You're the one laying awake. Mm-hmm. And you need the benefit of forgiving.
Yes.
Because if not, you're chained to the past.
That's right. And
I've seen so many people through the years, Jill, that are living in bondage to somebody that's dead. Mm-hmm. A parent or an authority figure in their life wounded them and hurt them and really messed them up, and they never let go.
They might say they never asked for forgiveness before they died. That's not how that works.
No.
You give it. Whether they ask for it or not, you give forgiveness. Yeah. It's for you.
The Bible talks about this in Colossians and in other places. It says, forgiving one another as God has forgiven you for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
So how did He forgive us? He forgave us without us asking.
That's right.
And He forgave us forever. In other words, He don't keep bringing it up. Mm-hmm. Aren't you thankful that God does not keep bringing up your past?
Yes, I am.
I've told so many couples through the years, Jill, maybe one of the two have been unfaithful to each other. They have made some terrible mistakes. And, well, I'm going to say mistake, because the mistake is I went down here and turned the wrong direction.
Right.
They sinned.
They made bad choices.
They made bad choices and they sinned. And I'll tell the spouse that is the one that's been wounded by this. If you're going to stay with them, you can't keep bringing it up.
That's right.
Yeah, but I can't trust them. I understand that. And forgive does not mean, listen close, forgiving does not mean I've got to trust you.
Right.
And I've told many people that have been unfaithful. They said, well, she's forgiven her. He's forgiven me. They said they've forgiven me, but they still don't trust me. I said, well, they have no reason to trust you.
Those aren't the same things.
Yeah, it's two totally different things. You know, forgiveness is one thing. It's sending away. But see, to forgive, you know, to forgive, as Jill said, it's for your benefit, not their benefit. And if I'm going to forgive, I can't keep bringing it up.
Yeah.
I can't keep rehashing it. And so this person says, but they got to trust me. No, they don't. Because trust is based on track record. Proverbs says that putting trust in an unfaithful person, like a person who's blown their track record, is like having a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. Yeah. Both at the same time. So you got pain on both ends. And so, but I have to take responsibility for my issues. Hosea 4:4 says, don't point your finger at someone else and try to pass the blame to them. Kids do that all the time.
All the time. They just stay doing that.
I didn't do it. Johnny did it. Susie did it. Listen to this statement. It's painful to admit your faults. It takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
But in the long term, it's more painful not to. You know, I know you remember this. When Rod, Jill's husband, first moved to Florida to work with us, we couldn't afford to pay him hardly anything, so he lived with us for a while. And I remember one night, sometime, all the family was sitting around talking, and we used to call him, I've been everywhere, man. And really, he just about has. And he was talking about some trip he was on, and he goes on and on and on about it. And then all of a sudden, you remember? He stopped. He said, that's not true. That's not the way that happened. Matter of fact, I ain't never been to that city. He said, I apologize that I exaggerated and didn't tell the truth. And so a little bit later, I went into the kitchen, and he walked in there, and he said, look, you know, Pastor said, because I was stretching it, because I was not telling the truth, I'll pack my bags and get out of town tomorrow if you want me to, because, you know, you need somebody that's trustworthy. I said, that is trustworthy. I said, Rod, you know, you taking ownership didn't diminish you in my eyes. You went up in my eyes because you were willing to correct it and take responsibility. And I said, I have met very few people in my life that are secure enough, confident enough to do that. Yeah. So you got to take responsibility. Then number 4, be careful that you don't accept trouble as everyday life. Now, while everybody has trouble, but don't live expecting it.
Right.
Don't live expecting trouble. In Romans 12:2, it says in the Message, don't become so well adjusted to the culture around you that you fit into it without even thinking about it. And that is such a powerful, sad truth today. That we I think it goes on to say, or maybe the Living Bible says, don't let it squeeze you into its mold. You know, be careful that you don't accept trouble.
We love a bad story.
No, that's not the truth.
We love, like on social media and, you know, just Instagram, Facebook, or whatever means you are on. You can't just scroll and feel good about the world. That's not how that works. You know, you don't ever hear about the good Samaritans. You don't hear about the rescues and the good parents and the good kids in school. I mean, all we see is just how the world's unraveling. It's unraveling and it's unraveling and it's falling apart. So, you know, you're going to find what you're looking for. We talked about that last week. You're going to move in the intention of your focus, but ask your family, do I walk around like one of those people that just expects the worst thing to happen? Is everything that comes out of my mouth negative? you know, like Eeyore on Winnie the Pooh, and he always just walks around, like it will be sunny everywhere except over him. It's raining over him. Like, do you carry that cloud with you when you go? You can ask some trusted people in your life, and they'll tell you. Your kids will be really honest with you. Do you think Mama is grumpy? Do I always expect bad things? You know what? If you're expecting bad things to happen around you all the time, you're expecting the worst from your kids. You're expecting the worst from your marriage. You're not calling your kids higher by expecting the worst from them, by saying, I knew you were going to do that.
So they're probably, with their kids, they're probably watching to catch them doing something wrong.
Yeah, like kind of hiding around. Like, you know, we always believed the devil was hiding behind the corner with a pitchfork when we were kids. Like, are you the devil with a pitchfork kind of thing, waiting to catch your kids? And when's the last time you actually caught one of your kids doing something right and you just made a big deal about how great of a job they did and how well they treated their sister, or how respectful they were when they spoke to you? You know, just be aware that, yes, we live in a broken world, and we know that statistically it's going to get worse before Jesus Christ returns. But this is when we shine. This is when the body of Christ comes alive, and we start showing everybody that we really are who we say we are. So quit expecting trouble to just be a part of your family. Don't treat trouble like it's somebody that gets to sit at your dinner table every night. Quit giving it a place in your home and in your conversations. Lighten the mood, change it up, learn some jokes, learn to laugh. We do a lot of laughing.
Oh boy, don't we?
We probably laugh at things we should be concerned about. We laugh at trouble. I mean, we just laugh, but you know what? What else are you going to do? I've spent too many years crying. You know, I want to spend the next years laughing.
That's the truth.
And just enjoying my life.
Okay, the fifth thing to remember is remember God's faithfulness to you. And, you know, we talked some about that, about the rod in the hand of the Jewish guy. But Psalm 78 verse 4 says, the children of Israel forgot what God had done. Isn't it amazing, Jill, how present pressure can cause you to forget God's past faithfulness?
Yeah. You know, that's referring to, you know, Moses led children of Israel out of Egypt. And then we know Moses didn't get to take them into the promised land, that Joshua took them into the promised land. So all these people, you know, had grown up in these 40 years watching these miracles, and Joshua knew it himself. He's right beside Moses and Aaron, and he's seeing all of these things happen. He has the privilege and honor of taking them into the promised land to establish their new lives. And it says that when Joshua died, a generation came behind him that didn't know the Lord and didn't know any of the acts that God had done. This is the greatest chapter, in my opinion, outside of the cross itself. This is one of the greatest chapters of human history, that God has shown signs and wonders to get his people into the promised land that he had promised them. And a generation grows up. We're not talking about 5 or 6 generations down. So Joshua's children's children did not know what God had done. That's not happening on my shift, y'all.
How tragic. Such a great leader.
Yes.
As Joshua.
Yep.
And there came a generation